This is a work of faction, based on facts and some fiction. But if you listen carefully, you will hear some ideas that could turn the fiction part quite easily into fact, which, if you are a writer, you may thank me for. Only the big ones. Ken had been writing poems for a couple of years now and taking them to open mics where he had sometimes got a good audience response. He enjoyed the pleasure of others appreciating his efforts and was content with the feeling that some people felt he had something to say. That had been enough for him. That is, until recently, and increasingly, he'd seen other open micers brandishing their book as they performed from them. The kudos of saying, "I'm a published author." Then these other open micers telling the audience that their books were for sale. He'd bought one and read a couple of the poems before he got bored with it and never opened it again. And it dawned on him that there was more to this publishing lark than meets the pie in the sky. Bit by bit, he realized what was going on, or what wasn't going on. It's not publishing that's the problem. That's easy. Whether you're a really talented poet or a dyslexic doggerel delusional, you can get published. You can do it on Amazon, and they do a print on demand. A little bit of an outlay and, hey presto, you're a published author. And Ken was fine with that, a sort of democratization of publishing. Like many arts launches, chumocracy and contacts played a part, even with established publishers. He read about famous authors like John Milton and Jane Austen, who had self-published, and of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, that had 122 rejections before being published and becoming a million seller. But Ken didn't really want to be published posthumously. Of course, it depends what you want out of it. If it's just somewhere to keep all your poems together in one place, instead of on random pieces of paper, well, okay, that's a good idea to have them all in one place. But if you want to make money out of it, forget it. How many people buy poetry books? Very few. And what do you do when you've exhausted friends and family who have given you 5-star comments on Amazon and perhaps even have bought your book, some even out of a perhaps big issue style charitable act, to then linger somewhere on their home bookshelves, never to be opened again? People weren't selling lots of poetry books. But for Ken, the Holy Grail was spreading his book outside of friends and family. And that was the path, the pilgrimage to the unlocking of its secrets. Marketing. It's the marketing that's important. There are thousands and thousands of books online, but very few people see them or know about them. Getting it on the shelves in an actual physical bookshop is the crowning glory, where people can see, feel, and have a quick read of a section. And do judge a book by its cover. If you want someone to pick up your book, you have many competing book spines or front covers, so make it stand out and pique an initial interest. So Ken's book is called Affections and Aversions, and severely challenged in the visual arts, he's given his vision of the general content and mood of his precious poems via a number of focused bullet points to an original artist called AI. The resulting cover, reflecting the contents of his various poems, could, he feels, be an effective portal into attracting buyers into the delights held within his cornucopia of an Aladdin's cave of linguistic and emotional pleasure. Full of expectation for his first short-run copies, he sent some advance copies to well-known publishers. After his first few black hole non-replies and the odd raise your hopes replies of rejection, he decided that he needed to bypass editors and middlemen. There was only one thing for it: direct marketing. He was going to concentrate on a particular area of his southwest London haunts, centred on Putney, Wimbledon, New Malden and Kingston. An initial outlay in self-publishing would cost him, but recouping this expenditure was not his goal. He told himself he didn't really care about the money. It was the satisfaction of feeling that people felt he had something to say. That was his driving force. He started in Putney, telling himself that he had to exude confidence in this venture. He worked on one copy per shop to start with and feel the way. He felt the first shop manager saw him as a bit pushy, telling him they'd had a lot of stock in, but it would go on the shelves at the end of the day. And she had given him a strange look, as if to say, "Why the rush?" Unable to appreciate what this meant to him. And that seemed to be the pattern with the 3 other shops. At home that night, he couldn't help placing a copy on his home shelves and walking up to it like a customer, attracted by the cover, and then taking it off the shelf, admiring the cover again, and leafing through the first few pages. It was a Saturday, and no lie-in today. He was full of expectation, but decided he needed to calm himself and wait for peak time browsers around 2 p.m. But what if it had been bought by then? Okay, great, someone has bought his book. Okay, he wouldn't have seen them, but this was a start. As he walked into this first shop, tingling with anticipation, there were a couple of browsers at the section for H. Hardy, Thomas, Heaney, Seamus, Hughes, Ted. And further on, and through their shoulders, he could see, yes, vertically reading, that was the spine of Affections and Aversions by Hope. Kenneth Hope. The taller man skimmed that section quickly, but the older, studious-looking lady was more methodically going down the alphabetic sequence. He was holding his breath, but she passed on, and her husband called her away to another shelf. He decided such a thin, yet profoundly interesting gem of a book needed to be on display, so pulling it out and browsing it himself, making some appreciative murmurings that would not go unheard by other book browsers, he then moved it to the end of the row, where its cover was full frontal, gleaming out at all who stopped by this section of books. He went back to the shop at least 3 times that day, and on his second visit saw that it was not there, but on further investigation saw that it had been replaced in the middle of a row. How clumsy some customers were, not replacing things where they had found them. He put things right and moved Affections and Aversions back to the end of the row. After all, this was a new addition to the store, and hence needed newly arrived marketing. On return visit number 3, there were 2 customers perusing the bookshelves and a frisson of excitement when a young, smartly dressed woman stopped, looked, and pulled out the book, examining its cover, looking inside, turning 2 or 3 pages, and he had to stop himself from telling her, "Oh, that's a really good read. I have a copy at home." But she put it back, thankfully at the end of the row. Not a bad start to self-marketing. At least 2 people had looked at it and held it. More than you'd get online, hidden amongst tens of thousands of electronic hopefuls buried deep into virtual cyberspace. He felt some encouragement, and leaving the shop had a last look through the window, and someone had taken it down and was perusing the cover in what seemed like a somewhat fixated state. Perhaps the instructions to AI for his "It's All in the Eyes" image for his poem about Mesmer and Svengali was having some not at first considered effect. He slipped back into the shop just in time to see the young man take his book to the cash register. He wanted to cheer and had to restrain himself from offering to make it a signed copy. As the young man walked out, he was intrigued, almost wanted to follow him to see what he was. After all, marketing needs to know what demographic to target. They took another 2 books the following day. As his confidence spread, he did the same at the 2 other shops in Putney, and within a week also had his books on the shelves in Wimbledon, New Malden, and Kingston. A total of 16 shops so far, all displaying his creation for unknown customers to buy. Who needs that friend and family famous delusion? Of course, these were no small-time, one-off, independent booksellers. These were well-known chains throughout the country. And this was just the start. Nationwide. Direct marketing meant he would have to travel, but spurred by the thought of readers from London to Leeds, Exeter to Edinburgh, Maidstone to Manchester, buying his book was intoxicating. The satisfaction he would derive from seeing the cover of Affections and Aversions gleaming out from the shelves of British Heart Foundation, Cancer Research, Oxfam, RSPCA, only the big ones.